Bernie and I both were in training for engineering in the war, but we were overshadowed by the British 104 mission. And they were the original Commando people out from England. And they were great people. And we went down to Wilson's Promontory and went through their training, but then we never put it into action. It was a tough training, and in the mountains down Wilson's Promontory, when you climbed mountains, you got into the water, sort of they knew everything. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. And then they took me on just on a trip over to the Middle East. We were there for a few days, then came back to Australia. Then the first independent company was set up. I made my first parachute jump. That was the only parachute jump. But they were just a great crowd of wonderful men. I was academically pretty good, but physically I didn't quite get into it. And I'm still here today. But then the war, then, as I say, we didn't see anything of the European war. And in New Guinea, it was shambles. There was no other word for it. We were on New Ireland, and in those days there was nothing there. I set up a branch of engineering over on Manus Island, and as history turned out, they had the best record of anybody down there. But, they got tied up with the Americans, and they had a very good record. But that's about the only thing. Now the other one, though, on them was Bernie Callinan's my friend. He was a brilliant engineer. I mean, he was really a top grade engineer. But they went to Timor, and they really got tangled up with the Japanese, and eventually they were picked up is a strong word. They got out by the Navy, but they'd been there for quite a long time, and they'd really upset the Japanese. But that was a highly successful unit. Bernie was the number 2 in it, but he was actually number 1. We were up in Kavieng, and we improved the conditions there a bit so that we could live in it. But we had no knowledge of the islands, so we fed onto some of the major islands, a handful of people, and but they got out. That's about all I can say. On the New Ireland people, they had this Induna Star, and they got a stupid damn thing, but they were caught getting out, and there were, I think, 40 or 50 of them. I wasn't there, and they should have shot with all the ammunition firing power they had, but they didn't, and they were hit by the aircraft, and and forced into rebel, prisoners of war. That was the end of number 1 company, number 1 field company. I wasn't in Kavieng when all this happened, and I got in there when I got back from Manus, and got back there, and there were another two chaps I had with me. But we got in late one afternoon. We got there, and the Japanese invaded at 2 o'clock that following morning, and we were just in bed. We had no knowledge of the Japanese coming, none whatsoever. That only happened after we were taken prisoners. They came and found us because temporarily overnight we were staying at the one clubhouse there with accommodation in, so there was no people there. So we were staying the night. That's where Jim put us, and as I say, there was an invasion. We had no knowledge at all. They allowed me time to put some clothes on, and then we were tied up and marched off with the 3 of us, and that was the start of my prisoner of war. It wasn't a comfortable existence, but I lived to tell the tale over it. But we were closely guarded. I mean, really closely. We had no possible chance of escape, and we were taken to Rabaul, and then from Rabaul to Japan. You've heard of the Montevideo Maru. We had another ship, Montevideo or something. Now, we had roughly, I think, about 50 or 60 of us. We had some odd people from Rabaul. We had 20 odd nurses, and that'd be about it. When we started, the steel workers, we were quite good. But poor little Japanese, I'm afraid, quite a few of them died working. I mean, things had fallen on them or something like that. But they, poor devils, got killed just working in their own factories. I mean, we didn't lose a man. We carted materials. I remember there was one part, they had a big race, water race. We had a little bridge over it, and we were carting there, but the bridge used to collapse once a day. I mean, it just fell. It fell because some idiot Australian prisoners weakened it in the spot underneath, and it sort of collapsed, and the poor little Jap went with his bucket, a great tractor full of steel. And I eventually finished up at Sensuji, which was the prime avenue that you tried to get to. Anyway, I got there, but I was not very impressed with our Australian people there. I mean, they just kowtowed. And there was one group kept separately from the rest of the people in Sensuji, and they were all Americans and British and Australians, and mainly Air Force, and they had been captured, but they wouldn't. But anyway, they didn't comply with the instructions in Sensuji, and they were in this separate part. So they finished up there, and I finished up with them. Sensuji was down on an island south, right in the south of Japan, and there was nothing much there except, as I say, the group that didn't obey the Japanese, and nothing happened to them. They were just in camp there and for a bloody long time, seeing nobody and doing nothing. But, sometimes we went out and got some stuff. I got a damned goat one night. We saw this goat coming back from work. So we went out that last night because it wasn't difficult to get out. And we got our goat and ruined our food for quite a while. And we weren't very experienced. You didn't look upon people being really different nationalities, and there were some decent ones and some not so decent. But by and large, I don't think there was too much trouble. I didn't know of any. The goat business that finished up with, I think it was 4 days in the clink for that. Didn't get much food then. But no, there was, and as I say, after they closed Sensuji and shifted us all out, God knows where we went. But we were on the coast somewhere. It was quite scenic, and took us a long time to get to the north of Japan. But I suppose the greatest thing again was lack of decent food and no thought of getting out. But we're here, not many of us. Occasionally we had chaps that took a decent hiding, but they weren't that often. At Sensuji, they were rare. We were moved out of Sensuji and went up to right up to the northern part of the mainland of Japan. And there, that was in a mine. By our standards, the conditions were pretty poor. And few of us went to work to the mines because from sheer wanting something to do, we fell in time. And the main part of that was at the end of the war. We were there, and we used to tell this bloke, he had sold newspapers and things, say, oh, Sensuji goes smarty, the war will be over soon. And this day he said, "Go smarty no, Sensuji." Not soon, it ended. And we asked him how he knew, and it was in the paper, and so when we knocked off it that night, he'd have a paper, and which he did. And we had 2 or 3 of Australians that could speak and read Japanese. And they finished up, we got the paper and it was Sensuji goes smarty no, which Sensuji. The war won't be over soon, it's over now. was a little bit of tragedy. When the Allies flew aircraft from aircraft carriers down on the looking for ex-prisoner of war camps, and they found us, and then next thing was, I think there were 6 aircraft, and they just bombed us with food and cigarettes and God knows what, and it killed one bloke. And he had 1 cigarette left, and when the stuff dropped, and he saw cigarettes, he climbed in through the window back inside to get his 1 remaining cigarettes, and he was hit by a keg of something that came through and killed him. Now later on, I understand his body we buried him on a hill just outside the camp, and he was, what would you call it, taken up out of a grave and taken somewhere else. But he finished up being taken home somewhere to Australia, I don't know where. Well, up there, yeah, we were treated quite well. There was I don't think there was any brutality. There were Allied prisoners there, and they were a bit hostile because we didn't do any of the major work. And then I always remember the end of it when, now I've got to try and think of his name, he was one of the senior people, and when we were going out to work, which we knew now though the war was over, he walked over to the Japanese guard, he was a major, and said, "Hand me your sword." And the Jap handed him his sword. And that's when we really knew the war was over. Then we finished up, I don't know exactly, did we buy it or rent it, but a train service, and went down to the coast of Japan on that. And believe it or not, when we got to that station, they were playing Americans, "Don't Fence Me In." We thought very appropriate, but they didn't. It was a popular song in Australia at the time. We got to this town there where there was an American cruiser, or an air cruiser it was there, and they took us down to Tokyo. But they gave us a lot of food. We probably put on a stone a day. That's exaggerating a bit. We ate. Then in Tokyo, we were only there 2 or 3 days when an Australian ship commander came in and said, "Would you like to go to Australia? Can you go?" We said, "Well, we did." Some people didn't go, but we got down there, we got on the aircraft carrier, and we went down to Australia. Nobody even knew we were arriving in Australia. We arrived in Sydney, and there was a big fuss when we came in there, and all these people there, they didn't know we were coming. You can't describe it, but you were home in Australia. It was very difficult to absorb, and then became hard to realise you'd ever been away. It's difficult. because there are not many of us left. The people can't, and I can't imagine them ever being really knowledgeable about what a prisoner of war was like, because I think most of it, it was time. What was worth 3 years or something like that. And I think that overrode pretty well anything else when we sort of first came back and explaining to people, but you didn't want to talk about it. I've never talked like this about it. It's getting to the stage it doesn't mean anything, because there's nobody there that went through it. There are not many World War II people still alive.